All right, ladies and gentlemen. So basically, I was watching a Tello Jello. Actually, it's a Hello Tello, right? Yeah, yeah. It's I was watching a Hello Tello video, and he brought up that on the forums, some people are complaining that paladins need gap closers, and he was saying that he thinks that paladins could also use gap closers because other classes on the PTR have gotten increased mobility. And this basically prompted me to go make the first thread I've ever made in my entire, I don't know, World of Warcraft career. So something like 20 years at this point. Being wholly against the idea that paladins need any kind of gap closers, an extra gap closing rune of any kind in classic World of Warcraft. Terrible, terrible, awful, no good idea. And apparently, I had quite a bit to say on the subject. So I figured, well, I'm not, rather than just posting on a forum, I'll also make a video because why the hell not? Um, Now, I'll explain the reasons for this a little bit differently around than I actually did in the post here. But the general reasoning is that classes in World of Warcraft that have been designed to be very immobile, meaning if something decides to run away from them in a straight line, they can't do anything to catch it. Particularly if that thing throws a grenade back at them and runs away in a straight line. Specifically, uh, those classes are a little bit overpowered when something is actually trying to fight them toe to toe. Okay, so those classes, for example, are Paladin, Warlock, Priest are really of that kind. Like Priest has nothing to catch you if you're running away in a straight line, especially if you throw a grenade behind you. Warlocks have nothing to catch you if they're running away in a straight line. You throw a grenade behind you. Paladin is basically the same thing. At best, they can do is they can like bubble the grenade off and be like, "No, wait, come back." But all three of these classes, if you're up close and personal with them, if you're actually stuck in a dual circle with them or you're tangoing with them, they are absolute monsters. Hey, I'm trying to make a video here. Relax. They are absolute monsters. A couple other classes you can slot in there, sort of like they're changing a little bit in Season of Discovery though. Is Shaman traditionally and what's the other one? Warrior traditionally. Both classes that are technically highly immobile, at least in Classic WoW, not so much in Season of Discovery. In Season of Discovery, they've given shamans a lot of tools. So, for example, shamans have a decoy totem now that basically gives them freedom for 10 seconds. They can summon the spirit wolves, which will make them move faster, and I think also gives them the freedom effect. I haven't confirmed that yet. So they've gotten some mobility. They have frost shock when they get within 20 yards, so they can keep you most classes slowed permanently. So they've kind of shifted away from that game design. But it used to be the case that if you ran away from Shaman in a straight line, like what are they going to do? The best thing they can do is Ghost Wolf and try to chase after you. But a lot of them don't have talent points in Ghost Wolf. Improved Ghost Wolf, so that's like a 3-second cast. It's not the greatest thing in the world.
Mm.
But at least they kind of had something. That's why I say it was soft. Warriors, of course, have a ton of gap closing mechanics, but if you ever slowed them or snared them, they just kind of looked at you funny and were harmless. But if you stood toe to toe with any of those 5 classes, they would absolutely decimate you. They are absolutely terrifying, like super hard to kill, very tanky. Their DPS is through the roof. You don't want to go anywhere near those classes. Meanwhile, the more mobile classes, so that would be Mage, Druid, and Rogue and Hunter, right? Um, they're classes that if something is on top of them and giving them the business, they are not happy about the situation whatsoever. They would very much prefer to keep their distance and keep blasting you with spells or, waiting for the energy to regen and re-stealthing and coming back in on you that way. So definitely not toe-to-toe classes. All right, so that's the first point I want to make. The second point that I want to make is that I keep telling everybody that Paladins, we use Nade, Repent, Goblin Mortar, and Gnomish Denomatic. We basically use our Trinket slots as our gap closers, whether we have Repent or not. We use our Trinket slots as gap closers, and Blizzard was nice enough to give us Avenger Shield and give us Exorcism as a baseline in the PTR, so we absolutely do not need any additional gap closers whatsoever. If you give paladins enough gap closers that they're able to start sitting on top of people in melee, nobody survives that. Like nobody survives that. Hey guys, I don't know what you're barking about here, but oh, I see what's going on. I put both their food bowls too close together, so one's trying to eat, the other one's getting defensive of it. We recording here? All right, so you may not have never done this test, but if you do a toe-to-toe test, like you put a paladin in melee with every other class in the game, you put them toe-to-toe and you don't let them move anywhere, paladin wins that fight every single time. And not just every single time, they win it spectacularly, meaning that they could almost 2-to-1 toe-to-toe virtually any other class in the game. The reason for this is when they are properly geared, they have so many defensive cooldowns. Their healing is absolutely terrifying. Their DPS is terrifying. Their mana regeneration when they're allowed to hit on something is insane. And so, for example, you might be thinking of Judgment of Wisdom plus Seal of Righteousnesses times 2 proc rate, or Seal of Martyrdoms times 2 proc rate for Judgment of Wisdom. And then you might be using something like Edward the Odd or a life-stealing weapon of some kind. Absolutely monstrous when they're allowed to sit on people in combat. If we're talking about Reckoning Paladins, it gets even worse. If we're talking about Eye for an Eye, Reckoning Paladins, it gets even worse. If we're talking about Holy Shield Paladins, it gets even worse. If we're talking about Holy Shock Paladins, it gets even worse. And of course, if you Deep Ret Paladins have Repent, which is basically another gap closer on a minute-long cooldown. Nothing in the game survives a Paladin sitting on top of them. Like, absolutely nothing survives. That's if, however, the Paladin is built correctly. And it's something like 80% of the Paladin player base or more do not put the proper gear on their Paladin. And then they try to play it, and then they'll come to the forum and they'll complain about issues that they have with the class. So, for example, I've seen Paladins running around. I've seen Saviks running around with 3,000 hit points on his phase 3 Paladin with 2,500 mana, and you compare that to his proper gearing, which is over 4,400 HP and at least 3,500-ish mana. You compare that to my Paladin, who's got 3,900 HP, 43,000 hit points, and a bunch of fire resist on him, which is absolutely amazing. They refuse to use Sacred Shield for a super long period of time, even though they really should have. Blizzard on the PTR has finally forced them to use Sacred Shield, thank God. I keep telling them that they should be using plus healing gear. With the Lawbringer set has plus healing gear, so it's basically forcing them to use plus healing gear in conjunction with Sacred Shield, so thank God for that. Yeah, do not give them any more gap closers. I'm looking at the field right now for Paladin, and I'm like, please don't give us anything that helps us gap close or increases our survivability anymore. You've done enough. Holy crap, you might have even done too much. Literally, I would be okay with promoting some Paladin nerfs on the PTR. And no, I'm not joking. Part of the issue that I have is right here. It's the sheer amount of defensive abilities that we currently have. So, for example, right, we have got Divine Protection on a 3-minute cooldown. We got Bubble on a 5-minute cooldown. We got Wings on a 3-minute cooldown. She's technically both an offensive and a defensive capability. We have Blessing of Protection on a 3-minute cooldown if we're fighting any kind of physical damage dealer. We have Aura Mastery and or Avengers Shield, whichever one you prefer, which can be used to bridge those gaps both offensively and defensively. So, for example, Aura Mastery, basically we have so many defensive cooldowns that's going to be really most of our opponents have a 48-second window to try to kill us before we have access to another defensive cooldown, and you can use Avengers Shield or Aura Mastery to kind of bridge that gap quite effectively and to a terrifying degree. Aura Mastery is more of a defensive usability, but you can also be used offensively. Avengers Shield has both offensive and defensive applications, right? If you need to use her as a defensive ability, there's most classes in the game you can slow and run away in a straight line to get some heals in. or or you use her offensively to gap close, and when you are physically on top of the enemy, their DPS drops drastically, which is a bit of a defensive ability if you think about it that way. Worst case scenario, you're using Avengers to slow somebody, get close enough to Hodge stun them for 6 seconds, and then you're using the Hodge stun to heal to full, which in PvP gear, of course, that's going to be on for many classes, that's going to be like a 35-second cooldown Hodge stun. You can use that to bridge the gap between all your defensive abilities. Paladins do not need any gap closers, for the love of God. You can actually think of their defensive abilities as pseudo gap closers, because the only way to get a Paladin off of you once they are physically on top of you, because they're effectively immune to slows and snares, is to do enough damage to them that they're forced to stop and heal, or to hit them with a CC yourself, and that's just going to find you trading CC for CC. The problem with this, of course, is that with this many defensive cooldowns, not only can you not slow or snare them, you can't really get them off of you from doing damage to them very well. At least that's what I'm kind of foreseeing. Avengers Shield is still absolutely terrifying under these circumstances, because let's say I didn't need to use Avengers Shield to get on top of somebody, but they've done so much damage to me that I have to stop and heal myself. Suddenly you stop and you just Avengers Shield them, and you just heal yourself to full, and you catch right back up to them. It's again, it's a gap closer. I guess I just literally described a gap closer there, so I'm being stupid. But no, they literally don't need anything. One thing that I have discovered a lot with the Paladin player base over the years, theory crafting for them, is that, number one, they do not wear the right gear. Number two, they do not look up a guide for what gear they should be wearing. Can definitely confirm that. They always... What's happening to them, as near as I can tell, because it used to happen to me back in the day, right, before I got smarter and started making videos, is that they're pressing W towards their enemies. They're jumping on top. They're getting on top of the opponent, but they can only stay there for about 10 seconds before the opponent gets them off of them, or they're forced to stop and heal. And they're noticing that they could only take out maybe 70% of the target's life in that 10 seconds. And they're confirming that what they really need is more damage. So they typically start putting on more and more damage gear on their Paladin, and basically trying to force the issue within the first 10 seconds of combat, basically, right? Whereas a better way of thinking of it would be to, rather increasing your DPS and trying to force it inside of 10 seconds, you instead increase the amount of time that you get to sit on top of your target and beat the tar out of them. Which is why that the gap closing trinkets are usually by far far superior to DPS trinkets, because they can be used both offensively and defensively. But more importantly, a lot of people forget that DPS is a component of your damage and how much time you have to put damage into your target. And these trinkets give you a hell of a lot more time to put your DPS into the target, which makes you far, far more lethal. The other gearing thing that tends to happen is, by gearing more defensively and being more survivable and being far, far, far more difficult for the enemy to get physically off of you, to force you to stop and heal, so that they can DPS into you, is also a massive durability increase and a DPS increase. So, for example, if you watch my Paladins in duels, I'm usually pressing W. I build in such a way that I'm usually pressing W towards the enemy almost constantly. I'm rarely stopping to heal myself. If I am stopping to heal myself, it's only for a couple seconds before I'm right back up and moving again. And this is just proper Paladin PvP. Like, I don't know what to tell you. The other weird thing is that when they start swapping out their gear for DPS gear, their mana bar basically gets picked up and chucked into the toilet. It gets dumpstered. It gets completely forgotten. So, for example, when I was like watching Savix videos and other Paladin PvP videos, they're running around with like 3,500 HP and like 2,500 hit points in Phase 3 with no PvP damage reduction whatsoever. Um, terrible, terrible, awful, no good idea. They also don't have Sacred Shield, so it just makes it way, way worse. But they have such a tiny mana bar that they're really all in on doing as much damage as possible and trying to kill the opponent with what little time on target they can possibly muster, what few seconds of actual time beating on the enemy that they can muster, that there's no backup plan. There's no, okay, what if they survive this? Can I engage in a mana war? The answer is hell no. Okay, what if that doesn't kill them? What happens next? Am I durable enough to survive and have another go at it just in case RNG didn't go my way? The answer is no. So, for example, if you were watching me duel my rogue friend, he physically could not kill me. But at the same time, I had sacrificed so much DPS that my wreck bombs were when I would catch him were absolutely pathetic. But I know how RNG works. All I know is I need to survive long enough, both from a mana perspective and from a durability perspective and from an RNG perspective, to put enough wreck bombs into him that eventually one of the wreck bombs will high roll and I'll be able to kill him. And sure enough, that's basically what was happening. I would throw, when he'd run away from me, I would throw a grenade, stun him, and I would catch up to him and put a 2.5 second Hodge stun into him. It'll be 3 seconds at level 60, and I'd put a wreck bomb plus change into him. The change being, of course, like, a judgment, and then I'd spam a Hammer of Wrath and maybe a Crusader Strike and a more spamming of Hammer of Wrath, right? One of the two. And statistically speaking, 1 in 4 of my wreck bombs will have a doubling of the RNG. So if I had a 20% critical strike chance, 1 in 4 of my wreck bombs will make it a 40% critical strike chance, and that's probably enough damage to get me over the hump and actually put them in the dirt. Conversely, when you go all in on durability, my bad, when you go all in on DPS, RNG works not in your favor, but in the complete opposite. It works against you. So, for example, you might have that 20% crit chance, but 1 in 4 of your bombs is going to act like you have no crit chance whatsoever, practically. Another 1 in 4 of your bombs is going to low roll. She might act like you have a 15 or a 10% critical strike chance. Actually, I think statistically it'll be a 10% critical strike chance. And then, of course, 1 in 4 will act like a 15%, and then 1 in 4 will act like a 100%. It's literally 0%, half effect, and then normal effect, and then times 2 effect or something like that. You get the idea, right? So what that means is, since you're all in on this one roll of the dice, you don't need enough DPS to get the job done. On average, you need a more than enough DPS to get the job done on average. That's what makes Ret Reckoning Paladins work, is that when a Ret Reckoning Paladin touches you, they have so much damage, there's like an 80% chance or higher that the target just explodes, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's like a 1 in maybe 8 Wreck Bomb from a Ret Reckoning Paladin that the target survives. But that's just that's not you working with RNG, that's RNG working against you. So, in essence, you would prefer to, if you're all in on one roll of the dice, you don't want RNG, critical strike chance, you don't want that. You want attack power because you want more consistency, right? Because, again, the RNG mechanics are effectively working against you. If you gear more durable, as a more durable mentality, you're going to get multiple rolls of the dice, which means suddenly critical strike chance and RNG are your ally and not necessarily your enemy. But yeah, so they gear wrong. Again, I can't fault them. I did this, right? The first time I jumped on Henhouse private server back in the day, I noticed this. I was like, damn, if I had a little bit more DPS, I would have won that fight. And so I started stacking up DPS, and it didn't really help the situation at all. It just made things volatile, is the way I would describe it. So it'd be like 1 in 4 times I would jump on top of the enemy and I'd actually kill them. And then like every other time it would be like, maybe I'd probably lose because I'm all in on this little bit of RNG. And I was like, well, damn, what if I played it differently? Wouldn't it work better? And Lord, I looked into it, and sure enough, yeah, that was the case. So yeah, definitely don't need any more gap closers. Please don't give us any more gap closers, for the love of God. Yeah, I'm just looking at it like, if anything, Paladins might need a nerf. They might need nerfs as far as PvP performance goes. But the gear doesn't really exist on the PTR right now for... Like, I can't even make dueling videos to show you how terrifying Paladins are in Phase 4, because the gear does not exist to properly create them. Yeah, one second. Let me pause the video and let's go look at a properly geared Phase 4 Paladin. Okay, I think I still got the Paladin kitted up here. Yeah, so we have a Paladin that has 6 out of 8 Lawbringers. I think he's got 2 out of... yeah, he's got the 2-set bonus to make your judgments 100% proc rate. It's 50% normal. But you'll notice he's wearing almost full Lawbringers. He's wearing a Dragon's Blood cape. He's got a Hand of Rag. He's actually put healing power on his weapon, like no joke. I might actually switch that out because... sometimes when you wreck bomb people, you immediately swap into like Sword and Board. It gives you access to Avenger Shield and a bunch of one-handed goodies and fast one-handed weapons. I might want to put the plus healing on the one-handers and make this a better wreck bomb, so like Crusader or something like that. Lifesteal would probably be even better of a wreck bomb. But you'll notice the HP, like 4,700 and almost 50 HP. That's pretty good. Tier 1 can get upwards of 5,000, 5,100 HP. You want to use the Wild Blossom Berries, of course, from Fellwood, because you can use them instantly. They'll give you the plus 10 stamina food buff instantly upon leaving combat. So it's virtually guaranteed that you can get those up under all PvP circumstances. So this thing is actually rocking closer to 4,800 HP. You'll notice that it actually has a fairly thick mana bar as well. It is not rocking the correct PvP trinkets. This is because I'm anticipating that even the gap closing trinkets won't be all that great with the PvP damage reductions, and you're probably better off just accepting the fact that you're going to be pressing W towards the enemies, engaging most targets in mana and health-based wars, right? Like hunters, rogues, mages, and even warriors is last one, right? You're going to be doing health chip damage to them predominantly. So I might go for the gap closers, or I might go for some more solid, beefier trinkets, one of the two. But you do a lot of trinket swapping as a paladin anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. You'll notice that there's a heavy emphasis on fire resist. So if I scroll down here, we have over 200. We have 216 fire resist if we're sitting in a fire resist aura. That is objectively insane. Like, well and truly, that's like damn near a 60% chance to resist grenades and all that stuff, which is absolutely terrifying. This, of course, is a Reckoning Paladin. Nothing really to see there in the grand scheme of things. Ugh, I guess this website is having some issues right now, where they're changing things a little bit. That's interesting. How do I set this? Oh, I didn't want to reset. That's terrible. Yeah, and so here's a good mix. I might have to replace Divine Light with something else. It is what it is, right? They said they're going to move it. They haven't quite moved it yet. We have Vindication, we have Fanaticism, we have Crusader Strike for increased mana. Sheath of Light will probably get 100% get removed for Malleable Protector, because Sheath of Light lost its now spell damage, not spell damage plus healing, which makes it incredibly terrible compared to Malleable Protector. Well, you're either going to go Avenger Shield or you're going to go Aura Mastery, one of those two. Both are absolutely amazing. Hammer of Wrath is definitely a Reckoning Paladin thing, but if you're like a Deep Ret or a Holy Paladin, a Holy Shock Paladin, you probably want Purifying Power instead. Yeah, the cooldown, yeah, you probably want Purifying Power instead. Hammer of Wrath is the way to go if you're any kind of Reckoning, though. Sacred Shield for days. Sacred Shield already was absolutely amazing in PvP, even before they nerfed Art of War. Now they're basically just punching you in the head with it. Now I'm telling you to take Sheath of Sacred Shield. You absolute donkeys. And then, of course, you got Holy Specialization and other stuff going on here. No, I think Paladins need nerfs. I've been looking at the landscape, and I'm like, you give me proper Paladin gear in the PTR, and I will show you some stuff. What we are currently missing is the Librams. So missing 40 fire resist Librams is probably the biggest deal on the PTR right now. The fact that I can't get Tier 1 is also a big deal. Tier 1 has a ton of fire resist in it. The Paladin that I currently use live on Phase 3, he has the Librams, the fire resist Librams, but we don't have fire resist Librams, and yeah, it kind of sucks. Onyxia Tooth Pendant, absolutely amazing trinket. Tidal Loop, absolutely amazing for this build. And then you just want some kind of heavy stamina thick ring in its place. This one is just pure stamina because you've sacrificed a bit of stamina in your Tidal Loop, so you might as well try to make up for it somewhere. There's a few other good options, but, you know, it's what it is. But, yeah, so please don't give them gap closers. That's all. Please, for the love of God, don't give them gap closers. Anyways, I'll end the video here, and Days Full Boys. Like, honestly, they're already hard enough to kill as is, but at least when they don't have gap closers, the enemies can just press W in a straight line, and as a Paladin, you're going to be like, no, wait, come back, which is perfect game design and perfect balance, right? They're the hyper-lethal, incredibly durable class that you don't want to mess with, but they can't stop you from running away in a straight line and just mounting up and leaving. Yeah, basically they're the holy equivalent of a warlock, except their version of dots is when they're physically sitting on top of you. Anyways, I'll end the video here, and Day Assault Boys.